Well, good afternoon and welcome to Sunday at 4 from Upper Trosnham Baptist Church. My name is Pastor Richard Miles. Now, I'm sure that all of us over this past week have seen scenes of migrants in boats crossing the English Channel or attempting to cross the English Channel. And it certainly is true to say that the numbers of those coming across over these last few weeks has increased quite a lot. And I'm sure that as we've seen them, there have been some tragic scenes, haven't there, of people desperate to try and find somewhere safe to live, because many of these people are facing death or severe difficulty in their own countries, and they want to come to a country that is safe, where they can be and where they won't face being put to death or hurt in some way. But as I said, the numbers have been quite large. Over the last few months, they've grown quite a lot. And many people are questioning how many of them should be coming into this country. Should there be a limit? And what should our policy as a country be? And these questions are important for us as Christians to ask as well, because we need to ask what should be our attitude towards those from other countries, those who come into this country, those who are migrants from elsewhere. Now, as I say, these people who have come over here are very vulnerable people, aren't they? Very often. And sadly, as vulnerable people, often they'll get themselves involved in things that are illegal as well, which are not good. And of course, there's no way we're going to condemn anything illegal that's going on. But these people are still vulnerable as they come into this country. And as Christians, we need to be those who are concerned for those who are vulnerable. If you think of the ministry of Jesus, he spent a lot of time with those who are the most vulnerable in society, those who others did not want to spend time with, those who were considered outcasts in society. People who had certain diseases in Jesus' time were completely despised by others, and Jesus made time for them. And so the general principle for us, I believe, as Christians, is to follow the example of Jesus and find time and make time to spend with those who are the most vulnerable. But people will say, that's all very well saying that. There's no doubt, yes, they are vulnerable people, but what about them coming over here to our country? What should our attitude be to people who move from elsewhere? Well, you may be surprised at this, but the Bible actually has quite a lot to say about those who come from other countries. And in the Old Testament, God's people, Israel, were set up as a nation, and they had people coming into their country from elsewhere, people coming from other countries and other places. And so God gave his people in the Old Testament rules and regulations. But the thing is, time and again, God said to his people, you must treat them properly. You must treat them well. And as I said, you could read throughout the Old Testament to find different examples as to where God says that. But I just want to read one example from the book of Leviticus of something that God said to his people. Now, Leviticus does have a lot of laws of various different things which apply in different ways today. But as with everything else, you must look at what the general principle is in these things. And here is what we read in Leviticus 19, verse 33. When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not ill-treat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. God was reminding his people that at one time they too had been in another land. They'd spent hundreds of years in Egypt as foreigners, and a lot of the time when they were in Egypt, they weren't treated very well. And that's why in the end, God moved them out of Egypt. But what he's saying to them is that you've got to be better than that. You must make sure that those who come in are not ill-treated, are treated well, are treated properly, are treated as well as you treat your own people. So don't say, well, they're only from somewhere else, we don't need to worry so much about them. They are to be treated, God says here. He says, the foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. And so with all the love and all the respect and everything else that God's people would give to their own, they give to those who come in from outside. But you may say, that's all very well. That's in the Old Testament. That's God's people Israel. What about us today? In the 21st century, Great Britain. Well, as I said, we need to be looking at the general principles there. And there is nothing in either of those verses that I think you can say, well, that doesn't apply anymore. God hasn't suddenly said, start treating people badly, surely, has he? God hasn't suddenly started saying, when a foreigner resides in your land, persecute them, treat them badly, injure them. No, that, I would suggest, is a principle that we can adopt for ourselves today. And Jesus himself, when he was on the earth, he told a parable about sheep and goats. I'm not going to read all of that, but you can look it up in Matthew chapter 25. And basically what Jesus was saying was that God's people, Christians, are going to be judged on the way that we treat other people. And Jesus says here that the righteous will answer, Lord, when do we see you hungry, or feed you, or thirsty, or give you something to drink? When do we see you as a stranger, invite you in, or needing clothes, or clothe you? When do we see you ill or in prison, or go to visit you? And so Jesus was saying that, yes, it's as if he'll be saying to people on that day, people like that, I'm representing them. Because if you treat those people well, you treat me well. If you treat those people badly, you treat me badly. And he does include there, yes, hungry, thirsty, stranger. So again, that comes back to the very same thing, doesn't it? And so I want to just ask us this afternoon to consider very carefully our attitude towards others, our attitude towards those who are from other places. Do we have that same concern that we'd have for ourselves? Do we treat them well? Do we treat them properly? I mean, some of the scenes that we've seen about the places they are, the lack of sanitation that's there in some of these places they're kept, it's just not good enough, because we would not think that any of us would want to be in any of those sort of places, and so neither should they be. So we must make sure that we treat them as well as we treat each other. Now, I guess in some people's minds that is not a popular thing to say, and yes, I do believe there is a discussion to be had about migration and levels and all those sorts of things. But I'm talking here about, in general, the general principle. What is it? And as far as Christians are concerned, as far as we are concerned, our default position should be that we treat them well and we treat them with respect and we welcome them. So I'm sure that as we continue to see these scenes, our hearts will continue to go out to them, and let's pray for those who are in those situations, that they would indeed be treated in the way that is right and is proper. Well, thank you for watching, and may the Lord bless you.